There was a moment at Thanksgiving dinner that year as I looked at the red wine in my glass, the firelight from the fireplace dancing on its surface, and I thought, how much does the truth weigh? Is this glass in my hand heavy? No. But the truth I was holding, it was heavy enough to bring this whole room down, to shatter the fake smiles and completely destroy the world my brother Gavin had meticulously built, right in front of my parents. The people who lost their entire retirement fund because they trusted him. You see, in my family, Gavin was always the son. He was the golden boy, the tech genius, the pride of the entire family. Ever since he built his first computer at 12, he was treated like a tech god. Every dinner, every family gathering was a stage for him to perform. He'd talk about blockchain, artificial intelligence, disruptive markets with such absolute confidence, making everyone around him, especially me, feel small and obsolete. Oh, your job at Helios Solutions? That's marketing, right? That's nice, he once told me in that condescending tone of his, as if my job was just to paint the scenery for the real heroes like him. And me, I stayed silent. I stayed silent for years. I stayed silent when he convinced our parents to pour their entire retirement savings into his grand startup dream, Apex Innovations. I saw the holes in his business plan, the empty promises, but I stayed silent. Because in this family, challenging Gavin meant you were the saboteur, the one who lacked faith. Now, at this Thanksgiving table, his dream had become my parents' nightmare. His company had failed spectacularly. A public failure he was still cleverly disguising with jargon about strategic restructuring. I saw the silent fear in my father's eyes as he passed the turkey, my mother's smile so forced it was painful. Their dream of a comfortable retirement had vanished into thin air, and they didn't even know how bad it really was. But there was a secret that only I and a few senior executives at Helios Solutions knew. A secret I had been quietly cultivating for the past 18 months while my brother was busy playing his part. In this video, I'm not just going to tell you a story about sibling rivalry. I'm going to take you into the eye of the storm of a family showdown, where love, trust, and money collide in the most brutal way. I'll tell you about every word, every look, and the fateful moment when a single question, asked calmly across the dinner table, made his entire fake world shatter like glass. This isn't a story about revenge. This is a story about the truth, the cost of silence, and the incredible power that comes when a person decides to stop being a supporting character in their own life. Watch until the end, because I believe that, on some level, every one of us has a truth that needs to be spoken. And this is how I did it. The trail to our family's cabin in Asheville wound through the Blue Ridge Mountains, the November sky a heavy lead gray. As I parked, the first few snowflakes of the season began to drift down, not enough for a storm, but just enough to make the roads slick, just enough to feel that once you were here, leaving wouldn't be easy. The cabin came into view, cozy with smoke curling from the chimney and a warm yellow light spilling from the windows. Inside, I knew the smell of cinnamon and pine was floating in the air, but I also knew something else filled that space, an invisible wall of silence, built from unspoken words and unnamed disappointments. And then he arrived. Gavin never just arrives somewhere. He makes an entrance. His luxury SUV pulled up, and he stepped out like a general returning from war, wearing a designer coat and a well-practiced, confident smile. He swept Mom into a hug, clapped Dad loudly on the shoulder, and then turned to me. "Hannah, little sister, you look the same as always." The words weren't overtly malicious, but the implication was unmistakable. Stable, boring, unremarkable. He didn't wait to be asked, and immediately took over the living room, launching into his speech. You guys can't imagine how crazy the market is right now. Apex Innovations just had a strategic shift. We're pivoting to a leaner B2B model. It's a big play. Only people with long-term vision get it. Long-term vision. I almost laughed at the phrase. I glanced at my father, who was trying to force a supportive smile, but his white-knuckled grip on his coffee mug told the real story. My father, Mark, is a practical man. He understands numbers. And I knew he was running those numbers in his head, the numbers from his retirement fund. My mother, Susan, was the opposite. She became a whirlwind of activity, constantly asking if anyone needed another drink, talking nonstop about the turkey in the oven, the pumpkin pie she made. Her hospitality became a shield, a frantic attempt to fill the terrifying silences with meaningless chatter. Her smile never reached her eyes. Aunt Carol's arrival was like a sharp, cold wind in the stuffy room. She was my mother's sister, a retired CFO with a built-in bullshit detector. She didn't do polite hugs. She walked in, put her purse down, and looked directly at Gavin. "Heard you had a spectacular restructuring." "What's that in plain English, Gavin? Does it mean you burned through all your investors' money?" The air in the room froze. Gavin faltered for a second, his smile twitching slightly. "Aunt Carol, always the kidder. It's a complex strategic decision." But Aunt Carol just shrugged, cutting him off. "I don't know about complex, but I know your parents don't look too happy." She said it and walked straight into the kitchen to help my mother, leaving Gavin struggling to regain his confident posture. The first fuse had been lit. Finally, Mom called us to the dinner table. The meal was laid out, a perfect picture of abundance and warmth. A golden brown turkey, creamy mashed potatoes, deep red cranberry sauce. Everything was in its right place, a carefully staged play. We sat down, Gavin at the head of the table, opposite Dad, the seat of power. I sat next to Aunt Carol, a silent alliance. Before anyone could pick up a fork, my father cleared his throat. "Before we begin, let's take a moment to give thanks," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Thankful that the family is together. Thankful that we have each other." In the silence that followed, I looked around the table. At my mother's forced smile, my father's angry and helpless gaze, Gavin's smug look, and a knowing wink from Aunt Carol. What was I thankful for? I was thankful that the truth, no matter how brutal, was about to come out. The bomb Aunt Carol had just lit. Hell, I knew exactly when it would go off. And I was ready to light the next one. The silence after Dad's prayer was heavy. It was broken by the awkward clinking of silverware as we started passing dishes. The first few minutes passed in a charade of safety. My mother asked Aunt Carol about her garden club. My father asked me about work in vague terms, and I gave an equally vague answer. It was a dance we all knew, one designed to avoid the giant elephant in the middle of the room. We talked about the weather, the local football team, about everything and nothing at all. But Gavin can never stay out of the spotlight for long. He can't stand not being the center of the universe. After filling his plate, he set his fork down with a loud clatter, drawing everyone's attention. "Honestly," he began, and I knew the safe dance was over. "Listening to you all, I realize our world operates at two different speeds. There are people who maintain the status quo, and there are people who build the future. In Silicon Valley, we don't have time to worry about the small stuff. We're solving the big problems." He looked around the table, his gaze landing on my father. "You see, Dad, the reason people like me succeed is because we aren't afraid of risk. We don't play it safe. Big corporations like Hannah's company, for instance," he glanced at me, "they might have money, but they've lost their edge. They can only buy innovation. They can't create it." Aunt Carol started to say something, but Gavin held up a hand, stopping her. He turned fully towards me. A condescending smile spread across his face. And then he said that fateful line, the one that had been replaying in my head for months. "Your little project is cute, Hannah. I hear it's about to launch. Good for you. But leave the real tech problems to the adults." Silence fell. This time it wasn't awkward. It was sharp as a knife. The sound of my father's fork dropping onto his plate was like a gunshot in the stillness. All eyes turned to me, waiting for a reaction. They probably expected me to lower my head, to mumble something to get through it, like I always did. But not this time. I slowly placed my knife and fork down, setting them perfectly parallel. I took a sip of water, not because I was thirsty, but because I wanted to draw out the moment. I wanted him to stew in the silence he had created. Then I lifted my head, looked Gavin straight in the eye, and I began to speak, my voice not shaking, but chillingly calm. "My little project," I began. "Its name is Heliosphere." I paused, letting that name hang in the air. "It's being announced at a global press event at 9 a.m. next Monday. You're right, it's not cute at all. It's a complete smart home ecosystem, with the end-to-end security protocol your team has failed to develop for the past 2 years. The smug look on Gavin's face began to change. I continued, "This is a each word like a stone being thrown. It completely solves the latency and security vulnerabilities that led TechCrunch magazine to call Apex Innovations' product an ambitious idea with a disastrous execution. It also has a 30% lower retail price than your product, with double the profit margin. What? What are you saying? Gavin stammered, his confidence shattering. I'm telling the truth, Gavin. My voice was still even. And because I'm the head of strategic product development for this project, I read the entire due diligence report on your company when Helios Solutions considered acquiring your tech for scrap. Your company isn't pivoting. It's 3 months away from Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The money Mom and Dad invested is gone. Lies, Gavin roared, slamming his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous. You sabotaged me. My father, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly shot to his feet, his chair tipping over behind him. Is it true, Gavin? He yelled, his voice cracking with rage and pain. The money! You told me everything was fine. You said it was just a small hurdle. My mother broke into sobs, her face in her hands. In the middle of the chaos, I still looked at Gavin. I didn't have to sabotage you, I said, my voice now holding a hint of pity. Your own arrogance did that. You lied to everyone, and worst of all, you lied to yourself. You don't know anything, he screamed, pointing a finger at me. And that's when I delivered the final blow, the killing stroke. Oh, I do. I know everything. Because your lead engineer, David Chen, submitted his resume to my department 3 weeks ago. That's how I know, Gavin. He doesn't want to go down with your ship. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. It was the final truth, a personal, undeniable one. Gavin's face went from red to ghost white. He looked at me like I was a stranger. And in that moment, we all knew. The kingdom that King Gavin had built for himself had just officially collapsed. In that moment, it was like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. My final truth, the name David Chen, hung in the air like a pronounced sentence. It was living proof, a personal betrayal Gavin couldn't possibly deny or explain away with fancy business terms. The entire sandcastle he had built on arrogance was washed away by a single wave of reality. He wasn't shouting anymore. The fire in his eyes had died out, leaving only the ashes of humiliation. Gavin stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. He didn't look at me, or our parents, or anyone. His gaze was empty, fixed on some random point on the opposite wall. Then, without a word of goodbye, he turned and walked away. We heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway, the sound of the front door opening and then slamming shut, leaving behind a silence even heavier than before. No one said anything. My mother was still crying, but her sobs were no longer of despair, but of release, the sound of an immense pain finally breaking through. My father slowly sank back into his chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The image of the strong man, the pillar of our family, now looked so small and broken. Aunt Carol was the first to break the silence. She got up, walked over to my mother, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Susan," she said softly, "it's going to be okay. The truth is painful sometimes, but it's necessary." Then she looked at me, giving a short nod full of understanding and respect. "You did the right thing, Hannah, as hard as it was." That night, Thanksgiving dinner ended in pieces. We cleaned up in silence. I stayed for 2 more days, not to enjoy the holiday, but to help my parents face the new reality. I sat with my father, going over financial papers, explaining to him what few options were left. I sat with my mother, listening to her recount the hopes she had for Gavin and the devastation of realizing her trust had been betrayed. They were difficult days, but for the first time in years, my family was starting to talk to each other with the truth. 6 months is long enough for wounds to start scarring over, and short enough that the memory is still perfectly clear. Gavin and his wife's house was sold to pay off debts. He moved into a rental apartment and took a job as a senior programmer at a mid-sized software company. He was no longer the startup genius. He was just a man trying to rebuild his life from scratch. My company, Helios Solutions, launched the Helios Sphere to massive success. It became the new industry standard, exactly as I had planned. I got promoted. My life was on the way up, while his was on the way down. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a strange sense of peace. Last week, I got an email. The subject line was just one word: Hannah. The message itself was just as short. I was wrong. About everything. I was arrogant, foolish, and a terrible brother. I'm sorry for hurting you, and I'm sorry for ruining Mom and Dad. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I know it's my fault. Congratulations on your success. You deserve it. Gavin. I read that email many times. The apology wouldn't return our parents' money, nor would it erase the years I spent living in his shadow. But it was a start. A first brick for rebuilding something new from the ruins. And that's the final lesson I want to share with you. Your worth isn't found in the praise of others or in your family's recognition. It's built in silence, through sleepless nights, through relentless effort, through the times you choose the truth over the easy way out. Be the architect of your own success, building it solidly, one brick at a time. Don't worry about shouting to the world about how great you are. Just do the work. Because one day, when it matters, your accomplishments will speak for themselves. And when they do, their voice will be louder than any boast or brag. The truth has its own weight, and once you let it speak, it can change everything. Thank you for listening to my story.